Demo John de Xibo, Jombo, Yandobo, Zobe, Son, Ribo, Xiaosu, Dembo, Dewo, Xibo, Juden, Jubun, de Kolo, Joa, Lano, Membo, Lado, Menon, Dembo, Sanje, John de我小家都把那乡村，就多就是接我刚才跟你做我就当这所见的广播电波呢，俺的点的那就接送的这个跑就那乡村。难道公安就都做上我一些叫做世界能不？找吧就得送那老眼王，我不就你就那乡村，全球电波正面大月叫深度找我就那乡村，对着见到水波送黄金，鸟面全见就那乡村。广播突击接电报，当街前边电报，是那一天叫做些的见些那相似，的桥着我月送列住，几多的求救么，现就那相似，这年这月那样的老爸到那肉多。新的当报一点点，跟着老杨，第八这样么家先给我别送走吧，让给谁说的那上街的吧，干嘛的嘛面当就么是安全不，没让落到这道不，这就那的那的。三那的也当起是把也个光当这的，个当那当起别老着，随便操练着玩着玩哟。
Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son of the lineage trained who wishes to follow the practice of the perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Shariputra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are neither impure or pure, they neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance and so on up to no old age and death and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path. No wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom and become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha. Shariputra, this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva noble Avalokiteshvara that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Sharadvati Putra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
So can la bu jie da zi yang la zhu jie yang dian su zhu da jie zhu ni mu ni long le jie jia zhu zhu zi qi ma ri min zi dong ye niu gu ji ni ju de zhu nong dian nian da jie sa jie da zi yang dian le zu jia se du yue gu 知道知念经，道理明显讲的，用了的阿拉巴扎的，阿拉巴扎的，阿拉巴扎的，这点知觉前了日子知。 道理的我明白着些的，高当的就雄罗多巴耶，罗着不别弄着着，有所以是表演着，所以就也没有人多。 马列谢家之间这边多，下界做我的那所我的，多杰千波的些多杰中，就在的罗波当那罗波，研究中别波当阿的下，两年新罗就那所的，上波东面也年那着的。初的月的当着别别，介绍个上六年所年光，家境是别居了所望的，两月月面兄弟路中大我这把这边个着急。上界公众宝宝有些所，上门大约就能说的，协助当别中阿的小，高当点别明白中的节，年就那些过去所那所，高当那么那的。刚进西的世界中国梦，我到这边我说节操节，东点边到不开着节，要是就把钱拿说完的，就算跟的那么多节长，刚了刚的。点了刚的新年去做的。说到天幕木中这边，只见那么那所的，让家所着给那大爷们，给上他把这边就我去，这边这边打开这把爷，现在新年那所的。借我更多养到那么多，这边去见别了龙学见，上浪就有点少做呢，多就强给个都说上街去当做这叫那那，想就不多大年就说去。大概去切这边做那些，若平时上街如果就上街就。所见就能了，想就不多当年就说这，大概就这边做那些，若了平时上街如果就上街就。所见就能了，想就不多当年就说这，大概这边做那些。罗罗便是三界诸般如。哎呀，当我是对这恰见那一节，你同到你了小王你噻，你同我跟我结吧，你他们我结吧是那里，打八对，你我一节，你打七年结吧，我记得啊。
As usual, there are two things that is very important for us to engage. In the beginning, cultivating a positive motivations to receive the teachings and dedicating at the end of teachings.
当我就同我跟我结吧是的，等到开始切的因是，你等到开始切的因是，那他也被世界堂这个团队因是。第一切的那俺让东部组织上界就搞不透过的，你透过了写过都第一切的那个写透过因是俺这里透过切上用过因是切。
So now to cultivate motivations, the first one should ask the question to oneself, saying, for what purpose I'm being here today? So the answer to this question is that I'm here today is to gain the state of enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. It is for this purpose I'm here to first listen to the teachings.
되지. 아니 사자 거의 인사는 가로 나온 데에서 이렇게 이제 아니 또 병벌로 저기 라마지 권대 사기에는 되지 신대를 요새지.
So then, if this is what I'm doing today, and then think about that, I'm being in the presence of the Buddha, who is surrounded by all the lineage gurus of the Lam Rim, and in their presence, and then you yourself is surrounded by entire sentient beings.
다 말아 나오는 말로 지고 이제 계시면 해야지. 아니 랑게 전체 파마츠베니 지다 대두니데 고 도는 되어 가실라 샤와체야 대두니데 고도는 샤와체는 게 뭐네 지 냥타버스는 이제 전에 제행 여행에 스제되던 대시 샤와. 네 내는 대시서 남아 쳐나면 맞지 문도 선된 게 아니 지 스제 뭐도 탐해봐 진양도 요새지.
So now, think about that entire sentient beings who are unable to engage in the actions that are positive, or that are positive actions which becomes a cause for happiness, and unable to abandon the actions that are negative, which is unfavorable result in the futures, due to the lack of understanding what is to be done and what is to be shunned. So therefore, in order to work for all the sentient beings, and enabling them to understand what is to be abandoned, what is to be shunned, and what is to be achieved. It is for this purpose I'm here, being in the presence of all the Buddhas and lineage gurus.
아니 근데 쉬베 라마 아니 다 dombanezo de lama na la ni kan de shue la ni nge ni rangji den zhe yin yang ta be sen je de da yin de pa zhu tu a ji che ge ni de zhu ba de kan de ji che ge nga la la de na ro ji sen ya kan de she ni me ge sen je de da la zhe wa ge sen ni de ba da zhe wa ni ge ni men zhe wa che ne ni nga zu che chen ni che wa yin zan de de ji le ni ka ma ni song chi.
So now, just being yourself in the presence of all Buddhas, surrounded by all those lineage gurus of the Lam Rim Chenmo, and asking them, may I be able to work for the welfare of all other sentient beings? How do I work for the welfare of other sentient beings? And in manner in which that how do I actually work for the welfare of other sentient beings? So therefore, in order to appropriately engage in the actions that are beneficial for other sentient beings, I'm here today to your presence to receive the teachings and try to cultivate a irreversible faith towards those great beings, and then cultivate a compassion towards all other sentient beings who are in your surrounding.
ka ma ni song chi.
Let's take a couple of minutes to meditate on it.
나도 이제 그는 치바 제는 하네 강 당무실은 주바세나 니 체내제 유정데 가르쳐서는 상조랑제를 봤어.
So, with these positive motivations, that the teachings that we are receiving today is the actual teachings that we are receiving today is the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, Chanchu Lam Rim.
된적이 상조랑제를 봤어네. 도마 안tempo 투비 한번네 다 되게 정도 숨버버 스레스서나 tempo 투비 한번에서나 리래. 텔레마 타녀서네 조지 바데 아디세레서네. 당가서 거스 봐봐. 아니 정말로 좀 봐진다. 가르레스 라다 중에들에도.
So now the teachings, the subject matter of this particular teachings, the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, is one could say that this teaching is directly given by the Buddha himself, Buddha Shakyamuni, or if you were to consider saying someone who is closer to yourself, then you could say Adisya Devam Karashirichana. And the particular text that we are dealing with this today, the commentary on the great stages of the path to enlightenment is Lama Tsongkhapa, which the subject matter that we are dealing with today.
안되지. 네 사제 소화되나요? 죽은 셈바 땜비신 제법이 저와 나가를 기바치비시 취지 저와세. 아니 저와 니도 땜바 생에되니 리피 잡대영에 세마기 저대영에 정으로 뒤져서나게 세제다에서 레파타라 마이가 소마나게 따제제네 아니 라마당 당하라 아니 기바치쇼 소야디. 빼면서 개첨보.
So here now, to begin with the text, we will begin by reading those two outlines in the beginning. The greatness of the authors given in order to show the teachings as noble source is the one greatness. And the second greatness is showing the greatness of the teachings in order to engender the respect for the teachings. This is what is known as the two greatness. So this outline itself is what is known as two greatness, showing the two greatness. These two outlines are actually not just we are at the level of just a scripture, but it is supported by valid reasonings, just as His Holiness often reminds us whenever we are receiving the teachings or relying on certain spiritual teacher, one must do so with thorough investigations, just as a goldsmith examine gold, authenticity of the gold very carefully. Similarly, what kind of teaching that we are receiving, from whom that we are receiving, must be analyzed prior to deciding oneself to receive the particular teachings or relying on someone who is considered to be one's own spiritual teacher and so on.
다 제법을 라미게 공부하다니 강제시 정교 공부님과의 랑신이게 된 타신부 진짜네 아니 친의 정에 속에 네 랑신이 이제 되 타신비 된다라 아니 저거 뺏게 쳐버려.
So it's the teachings it's always the teachings of the Buddha. It's always focus on the fulfilling the purpose of one's own self and that of other sentient beings. So therefore, the particular teaching that we are receiving has a same subject matter, which is primarily focusing on the fulfilling the purpose of oneself and that of other sentient beings.
다 저희 사실 제가 당할 가사니 저원이 녀시 저다시 당방은 저로만 제대로 이름발라 저희 사진이 아니 중국 가사 런치서 신이 때비서 때는 저다시 이름바니 아니 용의게 도단체 엔티면 청한 거죠.
So then next, the one of the important outlines, which is the Dambangwa Yuloma Chita Rimpa, which then further subdivided into two. The first, the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught the actual instructions, and then having then how to rely on a spiritual teacher, which is the root of one's spiritual path, and having relied upon the teacher, how one can train one's mind.
Ta tene lo che ta jang yin la ni che de den la ni bo len bi shi ku da ni bo che ta len bi cui ni che ta dong bu ri sa ta ni bo che ta len bi cui de la ni che lang chi na ja la ni bo che da bo len cui ngo che ta dong bu ri sa ta ni bo len cui ngo de la sa je song che ju bi chung ge da te mo yin lang ji ren ba nyang se len ci ju bi re da te mo yin lang ji ren ba nyang se len ci ju bi chen bi lang ji ba nyang se len ci che ta dong bu ni ri sa ta ju bi chen bi lang ji ren ba nyang se len ci la za yi sa je song che 대신은 주비 고담바 센제 코나 템바 센데 지다 지비츠 센제네 쇼발라 로츠예자 다테는 동번인지 다 센제네 쇼발라 로즈데라 센제데라 손제 센제네 쇼발라 로발라 로고비 전세 로발라 로발라 로베 산제면 주바 템바 아니 로발라 로바 니시바스 로발라 로비 리바 니시바스 당아주 로발라 로비 리바 니시바스 생이 저이사제 된데도 당아주 상축이 세제네 아니 제서주 쇼발라 간절 로고래 세 된다들데도.
So we are under the particular outlines of Semgin Lapala Logo Vijuzen, which is the reason why you must learn the trainings after developing the spirit of enlightenment, and then develop, the demonstrating that you will not become a Buddha by learning either the method or the wisdom separately, or then the third level of explanation of the process of learning the precepts. So we are under the third outlines, which is explanation of the process of learning the precepts.
당가서 되게 용어다는 시거로 당가서게 이 동안이 송제게 티모스 된 도는 파니가 양슬낸 거세. 다도 전에 티모에 러바텔라 티바침 붙질러 저다 치바도 도제 티바 러지세데 지당가서게 티바침 비종러 러는 간데질러 그러잖아. 아니 티바질러 러지다는 치바도 아니 상아도제 티바 냐네 저거에 세데 이름 받들.
So normally we have a saying that our practice constitutes both sutra and tantra. In other words, we practice combination of both sutra and tantra. In this particular text where it says it is important for one to learn first the Mahayana in general, this will then be followed by the Vajrayana in particular.
답변이 사제때 돼서 요도도 치 다들 되면 다 동보라 파제질러 저들은 이제 상선절 러버 장원도 봐 장내 제세제 담바송 존에 아니 제다럽이 추여세 다 존에 제다럽이 치들은 강라럽이 제당 될러럽은 뒤치세 당가 저기 아니 이 러브에나 티바치데 가르러거서나 아니 바로 대신 바 졸라라고 그래스 아니 바로 가서 제세제 러버러는 제세제 러버러거서 때 가르대에서는 바로 대신 바 졸에서 당가 초동부 손을 마서는 맞아 돼야 되지.
So we have then here that how to train after taking the vows of the Bodhisattvas. What precepts are based upon. How all the precepts are included in sixth perfection and process of learning the perfections. So here, now we are at this particular point that we are under the headings of engaging engaging in the practice of the Bodhisattvas, following the conducts of the six perfections.
다 바로도 심바 주 냥설내고나 다 바로도 심바 주는 자세지 쇼바 감각 간대체는 되그래 세대 맞을 것을 봐봐 사지 다라네 가는 장에서는 자세지 쇼바 탕치 바로도 심바 주는 간대 되그래 세대 개자들.
So now we are on the particular chapter that how all those bodhisattvas conducts are fixed in the six perfections. In other words, how all those all those conducts of the bodhisattvas are included within the six perfections.
야, 내가 저기 좀 그런 게 자체 뭐 쉬지를 봐 부수도 지금 거 같아. 아니, 자세지 쇼바 용서 좀 파르데 심바톤 간데 디그레 세된 저 희저거에 제다. 아니, 저 희마 저인디 고아 따단 소용 그래.
So if you are able to bear this in mind, of the six perfections are the all those all the conducts of the bodhisattvas are condensed within the six perfections. This will give you an overall understanding of the entire conducts of the bodhisattvas, entire practice of the bodhisattvas.
되지. 다 된두게 파르시버 주 되지들 자이사제니도 뭐다 샤르 샤종생 다 먹어야지. 되는 게 돈보들 주도 당가 속에 자세지 셔방 요소도 간대전에 파신 주는 이거를 쓰나 당가 좀 마음반에 단다 터거세도 뭐도 하이 그 함이 고반다 녀레 타바다 타제 쳔바세에 마속에 마음바이 터자더라. 대니 터발라 냥슬랭 거에 파르시버 주 장예 그래 쓰게지.
So now, in brief, that achievement of higher rebirth is our future objective, our objective of engaging in practice. Similarly, having achieved the higher rebirth and establishing oneself to the state of liberation and enlightenment, those are which is the objective of our practice. So therefore, what actually fulfilled our objective is by engaging in the six perfections, which is the bodhisattva's conduct.
delatu nge tenin go tsuida kaji ngani mas lo sai da yonga ngon do ida delatu le nge kaji de de hit de ramas jule ngoto la de bi changye ne se de ngoto da ngele ni ka tin chu do ngoto la ne ko yo ngoto ji da tatu gi ngoto ni ja de ni ngoto to bol pharan shu chu changye ba ne se de re sha dong bu de
That's what. And you're going my pain by Rinpoche.
delatu se nge tin go chu sha na
That's all.
아니 그뭐 단위 가서 거질해서 거기 패전로는 게 코트 사지 때 대셔요. 지전의 코트 여기 나오기도 그것도 고시도 못다.
Dilla Douglas, Mondo.
되게 사지 그 이제 희지절에 게 단다. 뭐도 되라. 내가 영어도 다 타도 것도 이제데 뒤중 가서 요다 뭐도 되게래서 될로 파전식으로 당해 봐 가르래 해야 돼. 예반에 소도.
So we are going back to a little bit to let's look at that's still the same page, but 104, that is the page 104, and let's read from the last. That's the one outlines. That's what you call the discussions of the main topic. The fixed number of the perfection has six parts. So let's go back to that. So Rinpoche is going back to this one that we have already covered.
될라 디노라 것들 때문에 장에서 말도 것들 될라 타투 거 가서 내가 것도 타투 것도 이제데 것도 내려니가 되는 되기도 사지.
So within this this particular outlines encapsulates both high rebirth as well as the liberation and then enlightenment as well.
장에 반에지 다 상추지 셔벌로 채와나 조발라 세빠되면 봐 지고라 대양 랑치 사주 원와라 땡체니 용수 조발에 매베 다디 땡데다와 차례 레장 예베 주장 뭐지야 메템베 땡 차탕제네 피손 초바시 고소 어선도 돼 다가 좀더 챙기나 오지 뭐지인데 리테
The fixed number is perfection based on the high status. And then here it says, to fully complete the greatly effective bodhisattva states, you need an immeasurably long succession of lifetimes. Moreover, it says, to attain quick successes on the path within these lifetimes, you need a life excellent in every aspect.
다 더러 가서이나 변화 파신테 버주지야 자소나 개체 담에서로 초산의 상제 고만타고 세요디 개바 아니 새로 빠도면 반에 주거네 근데 상제주 고만되는 냐고도 대니 거바 마치 거바인 집급이 제 가르잖아 단단 가서 천이 전에 때 던지지라 아니 차히 레장에 투바지 임바 가실라 럽쳐와지 로에게 가서나 차전의 면도와 인산에 때 천이 창와지 창고를 예송한테.
So therefore here now what it really says is now when according to the Perfection Sutra, in order to achieve state of enlightenment, one has to, go through immeasurably long successes of lifetimes. In fact, Keshin Dhamesum, the great, three great eons, countless eons, in other words. One need to go through the accumulation of merits and purification for three countless eons. Only then one will be able to reach the state of enlightenment. So therefore here, at this particular point where it says, because at this time, although we do have, those excellence resources to engage in the practice, but we are unable to recognize the excellency, the resources of that we have at this point. We're unable to recognize that, and we're not valuing that. And therefore, we're unable to utilize all those resources for one's own future enlightenment or the liberation or enlightenment.
당연히 저차면서 단단하게 되는 랑초 둘라 천이 참비 때 많이 봐도 선초 명예에서 되게 된다 니카도 기교여도.
So therefore, we find in the abbreviate Lam Rim, or the abbreviate stages of the path to enlightenment, where it says Lamcho Dubla. So in order to accomplish the perfect path, first of all, one need to have a appropriate, rebirth. Then, appropriate rebirth. It is only finding this appropriate rebirth, one will be able to make this appropriate rebirth as an authentic basis upon which one can accomplish the supreme path.
저 맞는 데는 랑초 둘라 천이 참비 때 많이 봐도 선초 대이 마찬가지 비존로 고소 디통 좀 바바데 라바데 지장와 내제 진도 떠지 상황 땜바지 아니 지절라면 년에 때던지 타되다제 대에 정서서 내종에 년에 때다시 타되제 대에 정서로서 인지로 뭐 저게 막 다운돼서 내가 내를 카드 키우야다 당가서 뒤진 가서 되니 맞아야 돼 로에디 따다 카드 예요도.
So one must rely on the authentic basis, which becomes authentic basis of accomplishing the supreme path. So therefore, this supreme authenticity of the basis of this authenticity would not be accomplished without without engaging in the practice, which becomes a favorable causes and condition for giving rise to the authentic basis. So therefore, by understanding that one must engage in the practice that becomes a cause for giving rise to authentic basis to accomplish the supreme path. So therefore, the Lama Tsongkhapa stated that, Yogi, I have engaged in this practice, and those of you who long to achieve liberations must do the same.
가서 저쪽에 정론지 가도는 세요로 아니 가서 내년에 내년에 세탄데 체장 대신 정책로 세데 뭐네 제가 저희나 뒤가는 손도에로 가서 디지털 가서 대셔한테 봐 라니기 때 지진의 냥선에네 아니 대다 팀바데 대자야 거고인데 지선라면 내종 예전에 대다시 텐도때 대시 정책로서 라네 치목이 용이 정책 그런 데가라네 당 예년에들이 제바이 저런도 더가랑 나오셔야 돼 Remember, Japan Ketchishona, Lari Chamorani Jerry.
So, as you maybe have had a chance to receive the teachings during last, it was on Thursday night, right? By His Holiness. He has given the teachings. The brief, actually, it was mainly oral transmissions. He did not go through more explanation, but he just gave a, essence of the explanation of each of those texts, including this abbreviated Lam Rim. So here, when you look at that, the last line, each of the stanzas, the last line, would always find that I yogi who have undertaken such practice, and those of you who long to achieve liberation must do the same. So what kind of practice that Lama Tsongkhapa was really speaking about when he said, I yogi have undertaken such practice? And the practice that he is actually talking about is the subject matter of this text that we are dealing with, which is the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment. So that is what he means. This is the practice I have done. So if you long to achieve liberation for yourself, you must do the same.
That goes on. That tension on the chatting country tongue is a law in that. Did it? Then answer, Kangla should be long, sure, Kangi should be Ludan, Kanda Henji the should be Kodan, Legit, Kang, Sambana, Ruby. So
now here in the text, how can we really accomplish this such a wonderful basis? For that we need the 4 excellences. It says our present life is not excellent in every aspect, but rather has only some of the aspect of full excellence. We do not make progress with it, though we practice the teachings. You need a life that has the 4 kinds of excellence: resource to use, the result of perfection of generosity; a body with which you act, the result of perfection of ethical discipline; and companions together with whom you act, the result of perfection of patience; and the 4th, work that you are able to accomplish once undertaken, the result of perfection of joyous perseverance. Those are the 4 excellences that we are talking about. Listen. So then here, although that we may have accomplished such excellent, such excellent basis, but we may misuse this excellence if you do not understand very carefully.
Teta ten pison soba tsanji jang nyumo be jen den roa ma ye. Te yang nyumo be on de men roa tan te jang micho be lando ji ne na la shi ji ma lo ban ju ji do be mi le ba she ba shi go de song do.
So now here the text says, since in many cases these 4 kinds of excellence alone may themselves become a condition for afflictions, you must not fall under the control of afflictions, the result of the perfection of meditative civilizations. As just the 4 kinds of excellence are not sufficient, you must also distinguish well in regard to what to adopt and what to cast aside. Previously, precisely what things to do and to stop doing, what things to do and to stop doing, and the result of the perfection of wisdom.
Ta judo gote pena judo mano ji macha na pena se de gotes ne jende na mima dang chi shin rang gen je bu cha ba da Jimo Jomo Jume Labata, Piso Soba Teni Labanji, Shiro Sondo.
So then where it says now otherwise, very clear it says otherwise, just as a bamboo or the plantain tree dies after giving fruit, or a mule dies with pregnancy, you will be destroyed by the four excellence. Excellent.
that they must go to the Kashina Pison Soba Chakin, Kashina Pison Soba Chane, and then you mo that gay Solomon and your Mojella drawing boyers. You see, you Mojella Mandoa in Judo Manoa Jimajana, any Jebujin Mangela Rajasona, and Messicola Doroa, Pena, any Yuma down, Shishin to Zealand, Jebuhin, Chin, Jebuloto de Maroa, any Masuta, Jew, Jising. That Jew, Jew Mola, and Pugiche Yomaroa, Tea Javajan, and Business Chanduna, Business Tolaroa.
So, so here now, it is, although sometime, we may have acquired, maybe we are managed to acquire those four excellences, but we are not being aware, so that all those four excellences will fall under the control of afflictions. Then you are not going to get any result. And even though that those four excellences are not, fall under the control of afflictions, but you may not be able to engage in what is to be accomplished and what is to be abandoned, without knowing by abandonment, without having a proper understanding of abandonment and accomplishment. Then with the lack of such understanding, if you long to achieve anything in result, as a spiritual result out of your spiritual practice, you will not be able to have any results. So therefore they set an example. It says, otherwise, just as a bamboo or plantain tree dies after giving fruits, or the mule dies with pregnancy. That is the example.
That's it. The Shiro Yana Karapejo Tongress Lawaina as Tatimalodi.
So now if it says now, if one is wise and intelligent enough, and how do we use those resources will be explained in following paragraphs.
Shiro Yana Machi Le Zombie Legend Jebushene, Lion Judenala, Bede Chepeton Rola, Shiro Mena, Asabin Jebula, Lonshe Bene Se, Suddenly maybe Shimala doing him in Gotuban Joro.
So then here it says, now the wise understand how the four excellences control of the afflictions, and knowledge of what to adopt and what to cast aside are the result of earlier virtuous actions, and they strive again at steadily increasing their causes. The unwise use the result of their earlier accumulation of virtue and exhaust them, as they do not increase them anew. They reach the brink of their future suffering.
That's it. Nenga Pechimborada, Tandamazo, Mule Tento, Nacho de Suyebico, Tadricilla, and Juman in it. So you bit and like Jute, Tandagi Tentanilla, Jumatoina, any better Tangi Sevanagi, any Lobachi Choson, so that I also told Mason, the bet Mahashasharoa. That Joan Dele George Chasona, any Yanju any Naga de Kaboroa. Garasanaco, Chui Kajamarico, Jentegi General, Judan Jebi General.
So now, if we are unable to make good use of these resources, having accomplished such a wonderful rebirth and the precious human rebirth that we have, if we're unable to do that, if we're unable to utilize this for resources, then it is extremely difficult for us in the future life. We don't know what kind of rebirth that we may have in the future. And we even do not know whether we were going to have those four resources, even though we may have taken certain rebirth in high realms, but we are uncertain. It is not certain that we will be equipped with such resources that we are equipped at this point. So therefore, it is, it states that it is very important for one to really use really utilize those four resources by recognizing how precious life that we have at this point. So therefore, it says it is not something that just by at the religious matter or the explanation of scriptures that following just scriptural explanations, but rather it is a cause and effect. It is a cause and effect. Whatever the cause that you have accumulated, the result will be given in accordance with the cause. The result must be commensurate with the cause. So it is not something that is belief or something that we find in the text, but it is a fact, actual fact.
Lam Rim Rinpoche nambare. Dati Mili Rinche degi Joshima yang the Tamasha asene, Sitin Himbo Jodo, at the city Jimaji in Roma.
So therefore, we find in certain texts by certain, the great, the masters of the past, where they have said, whatever the rebirth, the excellent rebirth, the human rebirth that we have, is due to it is due to the ones on the previous life. And what kind of life that we may have in the future, depending upon your present life. So therefore, one must make sure that you should not let this, rebirth misused and not having a positive result in the future. So then, when you again produce this six in future lives, their production will not be causeless or from discordant causes, but rather from the concordant causes that are the perfections fixed as a sixth number. That are the perfections fixed as the six numbers. Therefore, in this lifetime, you must repeatedly habituate yourself to constant reliance on the six perfections, because the superiority of the effect is commensurate with the superiority of the causes. A life with the four excellence constitutes temporary high status, whereas the ultimate high status which consists of ultimate excellence of the body, etc.
That means
so therefore, let's shift back a little bit here, where it says a life with the four excellence constitutes a temporary high status, whereas the ultimate high status, which consists of the ultimate excellence of the body, etc., and exists at the Buddha's level. Thus, the ornament of the Mahayana Sutra, Alamkara says. So normally we have
단지 표선 소바 제도 파테 내거기 단다 표선 소빌 소바 제네게 리테데 아니 내거제 네 가사 모테셀라 그레스 아니 타투기 모테테 상제 살려를 세우디 녜레데 자
So normally we have a saying "ngonto in yele." Ngonto in yele is which means the high rebirth, which leads to high rebirths, which eventually lead oneself to the state of liberation and enlightenment. But here in the text where it is the term that they use for this Ngonto and Yelen, it says temporary high status, which is the high rebirth. And then it says whereas ultimate high status, which refers to the liberation and state of enlightenment. So with the temporary high status, one must it says the life with the four excellence constitutes temporary high status, and with this kind of high status will then lead oneself to the ultimate status, which is the state of enlightenment.
대양 도대 전에지 롱셰 당리 피순 초바다 코존 피순 초바 응도 당 다드 녀모 오니 민도당 샤와나라 시진 마로바오 셰소 송도.
So then here's the Mahayana Sutra Mahayana Sutra Amkara, where it says the high status possessed of excellent resources and body, excellent companions and undertakings, not going under the power of the afflictions and never being mistaken in activities.
되지. 다들 당에 가서 그 동지 지적으로 근데 저기 것도 비슷한 소바 용하라 저 간데 제가 그거 세디 단데 저거디 아니 지바 동소나 로셰 비슷한 소바 용거로 와세디 아니 파신 주는 심박이 받을 거 같지.
So to summarize this particular the teachings that we have covered so far, these particular teachings. Now, what it's really says here in this, what we have been talking about here is now, whatever the cause that we may have committed, the result will be given in accordance with the cause. For instance, if one engages in the practice of the generosity, and you will have resources in your future life. So then in order to have an excellent body, one must engage in the practice of ethical discipline. So therefore we find excellent rebirth, the cause of excellent rebirth, not other than observance of moral discipline. So then, in order to have excellent companions, one must engage in the practice of patience or the tolerance, or have a compassion, or love, and sense of caring and sense of connectedness with others. So then this will then be followed by the importance of engaging in practice of the joyous perseverance. Joyous perseverance will then followed by the practice of concentration and the wisdom, which the wisdom that enables one to understand what is positive and what is negative. In other words, the wisdom of discrimination.
ngaso le tombo atesala kasegi pison soba yo nyoma che chachen ro de ma yo ro de ngaso ngoton la ren ro nyomo ge chachen la ngaso ngadun de pa ore de kasegi pison soba yo ge de la chapa shu che ro de la tembi chadan shu che ro de jyo ge de pa ge nyomo ge nyimi ro.
So for us as initial practitioners, the fact that the more resources, the excellent resources that we have, the more danger of falling oneself under the influence, falling under the control of afflictions. That is the fact for us as initial practitioners. we as a Debo, which is the being who are born in desire realms. So therefore, the more resources that we have, the more attachment and the more kind of clinging towards one's own resource and so forth. Ultimately, one is easily fall under the control of afflictions.
인산의 주요의 다투에게 남주의 샤르 거래서 녀모 온데 던져 말해서 디간은 저게 저소한테 콘도사에 롱테 장도아.
So it is therefore we need a wisdom, the wisdom of discernment, making sure that your resources, that the resources that you have doesn't really fall under the control of afflictions.
도대체의 자와 샴봉고 비송로 자와 대게 가서 상제기 동저상에 자와 샴봉고 이 자체를 돈에 아니 되는 저게 자고 송송.
So Dodigen, which is Mahayana Sutra, the ornament of Mahayana, ornament for the Mahayana Sutra, which is in Sanskrit, which is Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. It's actually the teaching given by the Maitreya. Maitreya, who actually commented the Buddha's teaching.
대체 맞죠. 저서 샴봉고 버서 그래. 단다게 뜸비뜸바데 농아데다 아니 저서 샴봉고 점을린데라. 아니 저바전이 시대에서 배우러 계속 상제 동이노 나정가 바데.
So therefore, Buddha Maitreya is known as the future Buddha, who will be appearing in this human world, for the benefit of other beings, to turn the will of Dharma. So therefore, Buddha Maitreya is known as the future Buddha. Out of Kezan Sangye, the 1,000 Buddhas, out of 1,000 Buddhas, and Maitreya will be the one of them who will be in this planet Earth to turn the will of Dharma.
대체. 대체. 대다 샹센지 쇼발라 로바나 샹추지 샹센지 샤와네 니스세데 랑신지 된 랑다신지 된 루바오 손도.
So then the next is here, the fixed number of the perfection based on the fulfilling the two M's here. When someone is such when someone in such a life of high status learn the Bodhisattva's deeds, these activities are comprehensively recognized as two: those which fulfill your own aim, and those which fulfill the aims of others.
대체. 다 되게 가서기 단다 가르고 그러잖아. 샹추 셈비 레칼 니레. 아니 랑신 되네 로주시세데. 대 샹추 생고 뎀바니 데레세데. 선제 단주 조베 상지죠. 고본 탑이 체도 랑니 조베 상지죠. 고본 아타바 타면 있잖아. 아니 랑신 이게 대두발라 랑데 타신바. 젠데 타신바데 샹추 생 연구에 있잖아. 된다데라 랑지 된데 젠제 되니레 소데.
Therefore, the Bodhisattva's the Bodhisattva's conduct, the main conduct of the Bodhisattvas is to fulfill the purpose of oneself and that of other sentient beings. So therefore, we find in the verse of Bodhisattva's vow, where it says, to fulfill the purpose of oneself and that of other sentient beings, may I gain the state of enlightenment. So they're here now. The very purpose of the Bodhisattvas Bodhisattvas long to achieve state of enlightenment is to work for the welfare of other sentient beings, in order to fulfilling the purpose of other sentient beings.
Teni Jubala, any Dayang, Teni Jubala to be Changasede, any Randa the Jedenu Jubala Yang, part of the Shimba Tungagre said.
So then, therefore, it says, to fulfill one's own wish of purpose and that of other sentient beings, and the conduct, the main method or skillful means to fulfill oneself and purpose of oneself and that of other beings are also fixed in 6 numbers, which are the 6 perfections.
그러면 쭉 반사.
10 minutes break.
네, 이제. 내가 제주 때 줘봐라. 토마 상생이 편다고 거라. 대양 류센라 뇌제단 제비 진배 제양민주의 제네 시단 제발에 레파 동반니 제네 첨보인 비 수준 고소 송도.
Okay. Let's read through the text here again. Therefore, it says there is a fixed number of perfection based on fulfilling the 2 aims. To fulfill the aims of others, you must first help them with material goods. Since no benefit will come from generosity accompanied by the harmfulness toward living beings, you need ethical discipline, which has a great purpose for others in that it is the state of desisting from harm to others and the causes of such harm.
되지. 고대고 쇼도아 맞아 또 젠더 줘발 파신 동보송데 젠더잖아 파신 동보 처음도 다 간데 진바도 처리 진바세나 젠라테 페나 취지 진바 있는데 아니 상생이 진바 있는 취지 진바 가다 동소나 아니 젠라 뇌세데 제비 선바지야나 아니 바로 보더래 진바 차고 말어.
So here now it is very clear, right? It doesn't require further explanation here. It says, because whenever you engage in any of those 6 perfections, beginning from perfection of generosity, so just one's perfection of generosity, in order to fulfill the wish of others, fulfilling the others' aim, to engage in the practice, by engaging in practice of generosity, one should have this general practice of generosity, accompanied by the ethical disciplines. Because without accompanied by ethical discipline, if it is accompanied by the harmful thoughts, although you're engaging in generosity, but if you have harmful thoughts, this will not become a fulfillment of the aim of others. And
된대지. 아니 간절에서는 된적이 내세텔에 도바 제다에 나가서 사타기 담바더서라 대세오라 제네제다 제벌로 도바데는가 제라 뇌책이 릴 도비게 아니 지 가르켈레스는 소센저 드리지라 아니 추진세그리 담바세그로와.
So what is meant by tsutim or the shila, or by ethical discipline, the moral discipline, is for instance, we have the discipline called the first discipline, or the vows that we need to receive to refrain oneself from engaging in negativities. Is the first vow is known as individual liberation vows. So what is meant by vows in general is now the vows in general, or the tsutim in Tibetan in general, is to refraining oneself from engaging in negativities and negative actions through body, speech, and mind. That is what is meant by tsutim.
제네 첨보 노도아 맞아 데로와 간제 상바다 세웨 상바다 저와 슈첨보야 근데 제가 너버시와게 동생 슈첨보야서나 아니 제가 너버시가 말이 되게나 아니 제가 짐바동에 슈첨보야서나 아니 상바다 제유동에 제가 상바동에 짐바다 수준이가 되는 되고인데 겨울로 첨보 슈차를 손도 젠데로 첨보 단데 젠데레다 라진이 전에 젠데라 아니 파시 동보 소자도.
So therefore, if one's practice of generosity is devoid of thought of harmfulness, what is harmful thought? Rather, if one's practice of generosity is accompanied by love and sense of caring for others, then one's practice of generosity will become really a profound practice, which will become a fulfillment of the aim of others and that of one's own self.
certainly 대 탄진바 랑사 츠네 마저바 진레 니레 샤나 츠트 다보 문예 츠네라 제마냐베 저바 거서 손도 제비냐네.
So then it says, to bring this to its full development, you also need patience that disregards the harm done to you. For if you're impatient with harm and retaliate a time or two, you will not attain pure ethical discipline.
대 가만 심하자다. 짐바데 비다고 용하라. 수트기 손산 거래. 아니 수트데 비다고 용하라. 쇠비냐네 슈침보 거래. 손도 거로 네발로 도마토나 컨트롤레 손토 말와.
So therefore it says, if in order to become a perfect practice of generosity, one's practice of generosity must be accompanied by the ethical discipline. In order to have a perfect ethical discipline, practice of perfect ethical discipline, this must be accompanied by the practice of patience.
다 제비 라니라 제비냐네 슈침보여서나 델라템비 장신지 디바 몽고 슈치 고 케도로 정용네 대로.
So if one is able to engage in the practice of patience, patience, then this will actually refrain. It will automatically refrain from engaging in any negative activities.
데 레마셰바 제지 디소바 데마케시 데데나 게왈레자도 예베 젠데 쳔보 손도요.
So then it says, when you do not retaliate because of your patience, you then prevent others from accumulating a great amount of sin and bring them to virtue by inspiring them with your patience. So this practice has a great purpose of others. That's all.
네 지당 가서 대로 쇠비냐네 슈침보 가서 샴바다 니지 저와 슈침보요. 샴바다 저와 니지 슈침보 가서 요베다제 아니 젠다랑라 코스나 랑나 듬바 랑라 가보칭이 마이바데 춘이로와.
So but the perfect authenticity of one's practice of love and compassion really depends upon the authenticity of one's own practice of patience. If you have an authentic practice, if one's practice is very pure, practice of love and compassion is very pure, then we will have a lot of retinues who will accompany us, and we will be surrounded by the number of retinues.
다도스 전체다 덴비토네야 지 저바전나 저바 지 추트소나 추트 네 심바토나 지베 상추 선데 니저 깨내랑 빌려가 제외데 랍침보 수지로와 연자는 위진다 첨보 송도 첨보 시작외데 소치주데 상추 생 깨내는 거로와.
Therefore, so this practice has a great purpose of others. Why it is not just saying a purpose of practice of purpose of others, but it's a great practice of purpose for others, is because your practice of generosity is really influenced or accompanied by this, patience, ethical disciplines, love and compassion, and so on. So therefore, this practice will become not just a purpose of fulfilling others, or fulfilling the purpose of others, but also becoming a great purpose of others.
다 파신 동보소데 젠데 주비게 아니 가사 젠데 노로는 뒤치도 송사송아 다 란데 주발라 아니 파신 다니 하도로 준주데데 송가 냥들에도.
So the four practice of the perfections, beginning from practice of generosity all the way to the joyous perseverance, those four practices are said to be the practice of fulfilling the purpose of others. And then now the next two practice of perfections of concentration and wisdom are focused on the fulfilling the purpose of one's own self.
랑게 때문에 시러지 2 넘버 2 대화 터바 이나 Dela sen number inwala myongye something just sen number jaba de mipala chetan de nebi lerong tobashi go lerong toba go dere lelo chela mechebe nyense kyo de menge yu zunju zamba gobe dene dedaki jo son.
So here it says, now you attain your own aim, the bliss of liberation through the power of wisdom. Since you will not attain this with a distracted mind, you must set your mind in meditative equipoise by means of meditative stabilizations, obtaining a mental serviceability wherein you intentionally set your attention on any objects of meditations. Since a lazy person do not produce this, you need joyous perseverance day and night that never slackens. So this is the basis of the other's perfections.
Shiroji no tu number two no just depend on us Shidi Bombi Nandrolan Senare, Nuri Bombi Nandrolan Senare, Tendrick number two land the Tobala, and it's the Nyaba Jabi any Nandrolan Togoros, Techi the Nyaba Jabi Najate, and La Dingenzicha, and it's Sandero was get it.
So therefore, what it's saying is now, in order to attain or the spiritual path or Namdolam, which means the thoroughly liberated path. Thoroughly liberated path is dependent upon the single pointed concentrations, which is the samadhi. The samadhi is needed to cultivate a wisdom which becomes a remedy for elimination of certain afflictions, which enables one to culminate into the state of thoroughly liberated path.
Ta lelo chin so ba ta se di ta ka je rang ki ta du na re shen chi ta du na re lelo chin na du tu ko ma ro was e za ne ta da rang ji ni ka ki ta ka du sa na zun ri de ta yi xie re yes ya na me na de re so do.
So therefore it says now, since lazy person do not produce this, we need joyous perseverance, right? Joyous perseverance, that day and night, and they never slackens. So this is the basis of others, others practice, others perfection. Sorry.
De na de ni bo de du ba la pa de shin ba tu tang ye de jin ze ran sin che de la rao zhen ba do de me ne zo ba shi ne dang zhuo wa xi jie be de number tang chi zhuo jie de sa de le xin number tang chi de me do song ni xin de number tang chi me do song.
So then it says here, for accomplishing the two aims, then the number of perfection is fixed as 6 again. The ornament for the Mahayana Sutra says, those who strive for aim for beings work at giving non-harming patience and completely fulfill their own aims with stabilization and liberations together with their basis.
Pejin de do de jing si min do sa do gang do de jing mo sa chang do a dan do de ge si de ge ta ji gang de xi de jap de ge long de de do a ko de wo shu do ko mo go a zum de ge jo ga sa ma re ta de no le de re do a o de le yang de ge ga ja de chi do ga de le jen de number tang chi me do so ji do a de ge de chi ma shen na je sa ma re.
So then it says, with stabilization and liberations, others with together with their basis.
Tanga tsupe ne dele jenda namba tangche de medo se de kare la se so na ni ji pashe tombo ngapo kare yina ya zunri ji paro de shimba me so na ni dela raji ni ga ge de yongo mare se chi.
So what it really says here is now, so whenever we engage in the practice of, four perfections, beginning from this generosity all the way to this the practice of joyous perseverance, if any of this practice, the perfection practice, is again devoid of the practice of joyous perseverance, this will not become a this will not become a perfection of, also this will not become a basis of the others' perfections. Otherwise,
뒤진가 소요라던 러그리 준비면에 싫어 로단다서 싫어 가서 비다보여서는 배째지기만 그 잘라 가는 주셔서는 지로.
So we have a saying that without practice of perseverance, joyous perseverance, then wisdom has no use. It is just like we have a very valuable object that you are not making use of it, but rather just locking inside the box.
제제대 매도지 내다 조시 비생 생미발은 내바 산대제 라제당 콜레 저 싫어지 라제스 손반데니 소소셰네 셰네라 하톤도 미출로 손도 대단한 센진반 되바 나지 데이 산대제 차시 제 제외 신주게 류조발라 네바니 고소 손도.
So then here it says, in this sixth, there is no complete fulfillment of others' ham. The mention of stabilization and liberations or difference between the two, as the stabilization of the mind on the object of meditation. This is being the imprints of the meditative stabilizations. And the second, the liberation for the cyclic existence. This is being the imprint of the wisdom. Notice that this does not mistake in meditative seniority for insight. As this is so, those who assert that the meditation of fixing one's attention in the absence of the conceptual thought is meditation on the profound or the speaking of meditation that is a single portion of the meditative stabilization. That is one of the six perfections. You must attain certain knowledge of the sixth perfection in their entirety.
대지는 맞춰서 내가 생각에 제치바 땡연들라고 아니 조화 생각에 싫어라고 단지 이게 노대진라 내도 저세기에 내가 생각에 땡연들라고 조화 생각에 싫어라고 그래서 아니 라제니라 셔서는 내가 생각에 아니 신내라고 아니 조화 생각에 하통라고.
So here, it is very important that one should not get misunderstanding of this two, the meditative stabilizations and the wisdom which liberates oneself from samsara. So, therefore it says not meditative stabilization of the mind on the object of meditations. This being the imprint of the meditative stabilizations, right? And the liberation from the cyclic existence, this being the imprint of the wisdom. So notice that this does not mistake in meditative scenario for insight. One should making sure that one should not mistake the meditative scenario for insight. So therefore, that meditative scenario is the single pointed meditation on the object, and the wisdom is the one that liberates oneself from samsara.
네 내가 가르치고 있었는데 맞아 이게 가라 단다 가신 하상도 던지게 또 건져 아니 센세 집마도 신 거마레 생에데 해송아이나 아니 테니스 하통이 라제당 신에게 라제데 하통데 싫어기 차도래 신에데 땡엔지 차도로와 일단 땡엔지마도 거마레 생에데 해송아 아니 신에다 하통이데 추네 코안디기 저거스는 추도래 일단은 데니게 라지 소소는 셰시와이나 아니 신에라 하통도 추고마레 송도.
So therefore, we have covered during our previous teachings how the Hashang's standpoint, because his standpoint is single-pointed meditation on nothingness is the sole path to liberation, right? So therefore, it is clearly mentioned here. It is you should not mistaken this single-pointed meditation, which is a samadhi, for wisdom wisdom realizing emptiness, which liberates oneself from samsara. So therefore, for that, the essential point here is now, the point here is that we need to understand the differences of the functions of these two, because in other words, the Lakdong, or the Vipassana, or the insight, which is the wisdom, and the meditative serenity, which is the samadhi, and those two have a different functions. If you have a clear understanding of the difference between the functions of these two, then you will not actually mistaken. You will not make any mistake recognizing or the differentiating between these two. So therefore, understanding the functioning of these two is very important.
얘는 신내 매바 하도 찍고 이용하고는 신라 손들이 랑질에 되는 녀모 빠는 녀주 뻔비 뻔바터도 마도 야제어 진행만 가르사 신내 가 일로 푸다 집이시로 요면 신내 따라 주는 타제 의미를 생각하세요. 아니 타제 의미 돈이 또비 싫어 되니기 신내에 따라 주는 아니 단지 코이 단지 사배대 제바 빠는 마도 양가 왔잖아요. 퀄리티
So therefore, one's insight into the nature of reality must be integrated by the shine, or the meditative serenity, or the shamatha. So without one another one will not be able to maintain the middle way. So therefore we have a saying that without mounting on the horse of shamatha, or the tranquil abiding, or the shine, one will not be able to maintain the unmistaken path of the middle way, which is free from two extremes. It is therefore one will not be able to eliminate the grasping at self, or the ones on mental afflictions. So therefore, one's maintenance of middle path, free from two extremes, entire free extremes, must be integrated by the shamatha, or the tranquil abiding.
정으로 이제 되는 송거래. 정으로 이제 돈이 또 배시로 배제 같이 여배 송거래. 돈이 또 배시로다 상주센 여배 돈 신내 되면은 데스 강인도 마도 근데 오만 주반의 상황이 이제 상황보기 쇼바나 이게 아니 손주죠 고반란 로트에게 근데 제가 친구도 송도 만두비 시대 장네.
그래서 신내디 매버 테스칼리도 송베네.
신내디 매 자네 레센타송
So His Holiness, sometimes mentioned that, there's a little difficulty of having a tranquil abiding, but that wisdom realizing emptiness is already presented in me. That's what His Holiness actually always says that. So therefore, it is, so now looking at, he also often citing from the supplement to the middle way, the deities on the middle way by the Chandrakriti, by saying that, just as the geese, cruise across the ocean and the mountains by using two wings, similarly, it requires a two practice of the method and then also the insight in order to gain zungjuk, in order to gain the state of unity.
로기 공병원이 실라 손제지 내줄해 비가라 로지 손대의 집이 땡연지 대신에 코다 손대의 집이 싫어대 하동대 실라님과대 조선지 콜을 요청을 그 괜히 로 공부할 손대.
So when one is really establish a familiarity with this practice of Shine and Lakdong, or the tranquil abiding, the integration of the tranquil abiding and the insight. Then these two mental factors, these are not actually a primary mind, but both of these two are the mental factors. But these two mental factors can coexist in association with the one of the primary mind.
되지. 디오데 다란도 데다 센진 서번도 나지 장 데이 산데지 차시레 저베 신주기 랑 조발랑에 바니바지 고레 소데 다른 것도 변에 띵해질라 찍고긴 리거를 세데데 아니 센 나를 제지도 좀한테 야쇼레 사쇼레 생에이나 데 산데지 차게 장지마도 아니 데 산데지 차용수 조여 말에 상대 차 연수 조바 8월 신발 연수 조바 일류도 조거래 대랑에 반에 버려 손도 대다 센진 서번도베세네 되네 스타가서 센세지부터 사쇼데네 센세지데 내야데 텔레 서버에 말세네다 만하션도 지 계시나 리그리 던지 땡이들 아니 되게 아니 상대기 차게 강요로와질라 총지 제레마도 상대기 차 연수 조바데 니야 말레스 상대기 차 연수 조바데 니야와라 아니 바로도 심부터 연수 조고 상대 변 상대기 코드 집이 파신 주 거래세나 리그리 그래서 고차 고주 생이지로.
So therefore it says, now in order to perfect the one's practice of the six perfections, and in order to gain the perfection in this practice of the shamatha or the samadhi, or the fifth practice, and one should perfect the practice of all the six perfections. So without which one will not be able to perfect the perfection of samadhi, or the meditative concentrations, perfection of meditative concentrations, because just meditative concentration is one part of the practice of six perfection. It is not complete part of the six perfections. But if you are able to perfect your practice and complete perfection, single pointed concentration, meditative concentrations, then this will be which is said to be perfected all other six perfections as well.
되지. 당가서 이바데 렌스니바데 조도아. 당가서기 동지적으로 배나 근데 제당가서 제와 심마 메기류 렘바 상절라 양 되게 차진도 참고 파르티 심바 참고서는 되게 말어. 근데 된지게 뭐도 제바제 표선 소비 뭐도 질렘발라 네 파진데 좀 저거래. 상추 선배기 랑게 되는 현재 타신발라 네 파신 중에 빠도 거래. 세대기 당년 봐도 예봐도 거바 생 던지는 거지 않아도 야 지저하시면 것도 무슨 레바 장지 세대랑 자는 되게 좀 알아.
So here just obtaining as human rebirth in one's future life will not automatically qualify oneself to have an excellent human rebirth. Certainly not. So therefore, just in order to have a perfect human rebirth in the future, and one has to engage in the conducts which enables one to accumulate causes and conditions which give rise to the excellent human rebirth in the future. Similarly, the bodhisattvas, in order to fulfill the aims of other sentient beings as well as one's own self, bodhisattva would need to go through the practice of the six perfections, completing without perfecting the practice on the six perfections, bodhisattva may not be able to fulfill the aim of other sentient beings as well as his or her own self.
아니 선제 당직이 제도에니 뭐들 하면 고바 타바지 예바지 제게 있어서나 아니 선제 당직이 된도 세요디 바르듯이 심바 주거래 땅에 라진이가 게 땅에 바드 주 상주생이 담바들 내네 아니 라진 되는 받도 주고 인설로서나 다시 주는 양선에 그래 세대로 보자.
So now here, with this teachings that we have, we have received today, what should we understand from here? What is, take away from here is now, when we speak about working for I must work for the welfare of other sentient beings and that of myself. If this is your motivation, then we should think of that perfect practice of 6 perfections. Practice of perfection will really enables one to fulfill one's own self, work for the welfare of other sentient beings and that of other beings. Similarly, I must engage in practice to gain the state of enlightenment, which is the bodhicitta, which also need to understand that in order to gain the state of enlightenment for the purpose of other sentient beings must be perfected, must perfect one's practice on 6 perfections.
자자 sembaban hyel bode ne 가르시고도 ne 간주 내가 가르에서 지 마다와 인소나 지 뭔가 쉬우지 주윤데 간인데 명예 차로 그냥 가요. 오늘 방지 지고를 사진을 써.
So it is always whenever we go through the certain chapters, so we should know what is the takeaway from that, and what kind of the essence of this particular chapter is talking about, because we have a lot of different explanations and the numbers and different outlines and subdivisions and so on and so forth. If you're unable to make them into a proper sequence and unable to get the essence of the particular practice, the teachings that we have that we discussed, then we may not be able to get any result out of receiving the teachings, regardless of how much time that we may have spent.
늘 사소때 삼바 자체를 마도아인소나 원내 전에는 가서 상일은 대바지로 타입의 선제 타직이 된다 주시지긴 제시자유의论去推进嘛了，给这上面送了人了两个节这个当给机械用完呢，就对了当的、一了当的、长下了当的，论去推进嘛了。
So here, we really have. It is very important for we as a practitioner to broaden one's own mind, one's own perspective. To really to broaden one's mind, because here, if one's mind is predominant by the narrow-mindedness, then this practice will not become fruitful for oneself. Because when speaking about the practice, we're talking about, working for the infinite sentient beings. We are saying entire sentient beings. It's a numerous sentient. We cannot fathom how many sentient beings are there. And then also we talked about accumulation of mirrors and a purification for 3 great eons. If one's mind is very narrow, then this will just go away. It will just, go away from your head, so you'll not be able to really, gain any essence from these teachings. So therefore, important to broaden one's mind as a practitioner.
내가 지금 그 생지연대 생지 공부 인자네 지금 저기 나는 아주 가서 돈도아 공부했던 적이 자꾸 봤던 게 걔네 좀 보여서나 거기 공부했던 게 개콘 가서요 봐 하나 시작하기 잠깐 가서 너 아니죠 너는 수요해지 맞아 메신이 지기 따야지 진짜 아소 코너 메딩이 지기 거기 쇼기 춘지는 나서 봐도 그러 대나기 코지 취소나 강해요 말이다 강해 최소도 가르서나 맞대는 강전에 공부치 지더라.
So therefore, it really requires familiarity with such practice. Familiarity with such practice requires, rigorous practice or meditation to it. Just like, because think about, for example, if a very skilled, engineering, the architect can determine what kind of materials, the amount of materials that is needed to build certain building. They already have, prior to building that skilled architect will have these ideas, including even the bits and pieces of nails and so forth. And for us, without having those knowledge, and it is something that is very inconceivable for us. We can't really fathom that someone who has such a knowledge of building a huge building without, having all this knowledge in him, for us, we're unable to fathom that. How we're unable to know that how they are having such an idea. Similarly, if one is not familiar oneself with this practice of sixth perfection and so on and so forth, and one will not be able to gain any essence from this particular practice and teachings. So therefore, it requires time to meditate and contemplation. Meditate and contemplate. Sorry.
다들 막 제반 차로 다 손바데레 또 당가서 장에 주인원의 장에 손바데 젠다 넘버 탕체버 조바 조바라 되비 장에네 소도.
So now we're on the outlines of the fixed number of perfection based on the perfection that complete fulfillment of others. So number
어디 장에네 다 토마산세게 진바 돈이 포아세제 데네 신제 강랑 파르미시바 마제 츠너바 조바셰 츠네 조바셰 쿠이 조셰베 메조비 준지 장신 상대라 때네 준치 소지 이 능바셰데 너로도 소나 싫어라 때네 레바시비 텐소 제베 조아시비 싫어 신주도 녜데 손도.
So the fixed number of the perfection based on the perfecting the complete fulfillment of others' aim. You first relieve others' poverty by giving away material goods. Then you do not harm to any living beings and in any living beings. And in addition, are the patience with harm done to you, without becoming dispirited. You joyously persevere at helping those who harm you. You depend on meditative stabilization and inspire them through displaying supernormal powers and so forth. When they become suitable vessel for the teachings, you rely on wisdom and give good explanations, cut through their doubts, and thereby bring them to liberations. Because you do all this, the perfection are fixed at 6 in number.
단지 녀라 나기게 알레클 고아들렘 발레 동보 녀 제데 넘버 턴체 주바 셰발라 가르고레 살라소나 저랑게 때 주발라 파르데 심바 중에 바도 고레스 가르세나 토마 ini jimba toye ohongi donghe de segre sen dero chedanga so uhongi donghe de sanzegi jimbe segro.
So as we mentioned earlier, that in order to fulfill the aims, in order to work for the fulfillment of others' aim and that of one's own self, one need to perfect one's practice and 6 perfections. So therefore, out of the 6 perfections, it says the first, you first relieve others' poverty by giving away material goods. The others' poverty must be overcome by the material gifts. So this is the first step of engaging in practice of 6 perfections.
다 신체라 파트너바 메시바데 아니 수체로와 제네제데 도바데 체체로와 수녀바데라 카테자 통에도 저바로와 파시테 동보송조사소와.
So then here it says the goods, and then you do not do no harm to any living beings, which means ethical discipline, ethical discipline. And in addition, are patience with harm done to you, which is the practice of patience. So with this, then 3 practice of perfections: generosity, morality, and patience are covered in these 3 lines.
뒤지는 가서 다 수치세디 젠라 파네고 메싱인데 송아 삼바 추 돈에 제소나 판을 보면 생겼들 수업하세 뒤진 가서 거대버도.
So when speaking about the moral discipline or morality or the ethical discipline is something that you refrain yourself from from certain negativities, negative actions of body, speech, and mind. That is what is meant by Tsultim, or the ethical discipline, which is translated in English. And then you are not actually retaliating the harm that is done to you by others. It's the patience or the tolerance, the practice of patience or the tolerance.
대체. 또 전주대 파시 동보선 수요나 전주대 조차그리. 마소에나 지당에나 대로 그 가사 전주양다 결로 저거 결로 조오세디. 전주세디 지당 뭐 조아 조이 차지로 알시. 개유 추쇼로 조이 차지.
So therefore it says the joyous perseverance is the practice that enables one to engage in practice joyously, with the joy and with a very delightful manner. So that is what is meant by joyous perseverance.
다 사대라 때는 진출소지 인도마세세 간제지 맞소에 대로 리 진출지고 리 진출이 나주 때는 최대 자자마다는 도와 전주다 간세다 간제 땡인지 템보에 땡지 바로 버저리 유구바 유튜브 집에 neuro도 좋아서나 아니 싫어지 레바다네 아니 싫어지 아니 가르레 최대인데 텐선도 타다지네 아니 좋아 메네비냐데 아니 터투에기
Therefore, then you depends on meditative stabilizations, inspire them through displaying a supernormal powers and so forth. So, if that is probably not possible for oneself to be able to engage in such, display, but one's own, genuine practice of meditative stabilizations, one can inspire other beings. One can set the example for others by displaying how stable your meditative stabilizations, which actually, inspire others and encouraging others to engage in the practice. And when this is then on that basis, and one is able to cultivate a wisdom which distinguishes, which actually become a discernment for what is the reality and what is not reality, will cut the doubts and lead oneself to the state of liberation.
다 파셔도 중에데 제양도데 메포와다 넘버메세 당제 난세즈다 샹베 메조당 가시 레바죠바 데이셔 젠제데네 랑게 데이 노 셰소 데니지네 랑다젠제 된라 바로드 파션 줄라 메테드 미롱와 송데 예 장신제 된나 델렌 룰루라 네바니나 데달라 go Cubanjoro, so Teta Drubalan Cubanjoro.
So then here it says, the ornament for Mahayana Sutra, here again it states, through relieving others' poverty, not harming them, being patient with their harm, not being dispirited with what they do, and delighting them and speaking well to them, you fulfill others' aim, which fulfills your own, says, right? And this goes together with one above says that it is not possible to fulfill others and your own aims without relying on 6 perfections. Once you're certain about the way in which you fulfill your own and others' aim through these 6 perfections, you will have perfect for the practice of them.
대다 이제 되는 랑게 되는데 그런 시카도 계시나 이제 되는 랑게 되는 인세 랑게 되는 나선도 문에 제는 가서 상생부터 장문을 지송도 란데 주 캐쇼데레스 이제 되는 인세 랑게 되는 주 캐쇼 상생sem이 되는 선도 문에 제는 레도아 제라 네슈 되는 란데 중에 되는 랑을 집어 요면도 Rangla Shambache in the Rande Shula do you de Jenny the Rangi Ten is a Katu, Guataran and Gisaro.
So you can, take this, the meaning of this, the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, where it says, sorry, the ornament of Mahayana Sutra, where it says that you fulfill others' aim, which fulfills your own. Therefore, he's always often mentioned that the bodhisattvas are very skilled in fulfilling his or her own aim, because not unlike we, we fulfill our aim just completely focusing on our own and having a too much, emphasizes on one's own fulfillment, and we by neglecting the fulfillment of other sentient beings. Whereas the bodhisattvas, their priority, their primary objective is working for the welfare of other sentient beings, entirely working for the welfare of other sentient beings. By means of working for the welfare of other sentient beings and fulfillment of one's own aim or fulfillment of one's own purpose can be accomplished as by product. So therefore, it's a very, very skillful, this is a very skilled, wonderful, skillful to engage in fulfilling the aims of one's own self.
That any tat teredo, that Ranshi, that Nasosaji in the Ranshi, you get Jubala, Nyemba to Passion to Jubala, Martin and Jigumare, Maten and Maronte Sondoa.
So therefore, it says now, it is in order to fulfill your own aim and that of other sentient beings, without relying upon practice of the 6 perfections, it is not possible to fulfill those 2 aims.
Tell a Nyemba to put Randini to Jubala, some Passion Jubala, Nyemba to go to some Sen on Dubashu Chimachimsona, did Jubala in Begari, in their Jubala Kibachi Sondoa.
If one is really encouraged and becomes so enthusiastic of how sudden it is needed for oneself, the practice of 6 perfection is needed for oneself to fulfill the aim of others and that of one's own self, then you are able to flourish immensely of your enthusiasm of engaging in practice of 6 perfections.
That is Yawin, Tangazu Tinda, Tangazu Toma Mebane, Tandabado, Rani Tandala Kale Casijas and Devocation of Muni, the Carre Salasona, and the Shanchu Sengi, Damba Zone, and the Jesse show part of the Shimpatula Molone, Hadesha Taninge, Mune Nangat in the Sheson, Tanizone, Jesse Shoba, Lauchembo, and the Yuton, Jesse Shobala. Generone, Nuanya the Ennis, Tassunju Senere, Zobe Sanji Cobonuania, the Topa Chichen and Chavini. Janima Dune should be in Lamana Shinjalotos, and another Mandre Chudo to the Teta de Janssen, any Bosho, and any Malajana.
So let's do our dedications now. Think about that from the beginning this time up until now. I have not been able to accomplish the result that I always wanted to achieve. It is because that I haven't been able to engage in the practice of the 6 perfections. By knowing that, henceforth, I will do my best, put to the fullest extent of my ability to engage in the practice of the bodhisattvas, in other words, the 6 perfections. And may all the Buddhas and bodhisattvas in the 10 directions to be bless me to be able to do this myself and that of all other sentient beings.
多根能道心了修波修，结我更多养道能道，这面去觉别了弄修。萨当能觉云den绕作呢，多觉强给国王女多说，一当不说，面着那个那样大呀面，天天人都别来做呢。卡达扬巴刚些萨巴的，老面马人给东周完了，南镇家业红包大酒鸡。两马顺便踩到更多羊，江边养着在外结双的，别人把更长那就年年周边见那年些少，让给这多边那就呢，修着在外长月头给去，昨夜遇见面包谁些呢？家业担保有人真就急，担保人出给马家宝，乔家娘把举别说的呢，人家前头一绕就把一，偏的带的谁话谁话说，谁见家业没用成了的，留住上桥浪就人别讲。他的那就一那别的心，家也这把人都终究急。朗诵主编听见主写经，眼见世界没当面面君，才让更多家园行把业，浪当这我马就急。刚才天把出了就是节，最近住了尊巴天边菜，土地那就大多出些节，这些将子说要就安节，就是那边国菜烧点节，那个城里说就结不到，路上点笔这面扫松节。昨夜明岁大多年久节，看着正月过月心安舒，偏当的我马连九月年，新日在我定在家作业，小别身体不度点九节，江边八月就大千八更多上不点样点见的。跌到根觉结色道路去，给我跌到堂前绕多我，弟兄西边叫我堂前去，我刚了就多我把的，大心给月早晚的给讲，从不谢谢绕多我就，呀呀，对，这呢。